Good morning. We are live on episode 1 of Tea with Rich. I am T, and this is my co-host and forever guest, Rich Lyons. Thanks for joining me, Rich. This is attempt 5 or 6 at doing this. Remotely has not been good to me or us, so it's been pretty interesting, but we'll go from there. We had said in a LinkedIn post a couple of weeks ago that Rich and I were really just going to use the first episode to get on the horn and kind of just shoot the shit with each other and ask each other some questions. And we solicited questions from the group, and Rich and I were pretty impressed with some of the daunting requests that kind of came in from Marco and Frank DeMaria and Rick Kenny and some of the others. So we'll go through some of those, and we'll go through a few questions that we have for each other as well. I was actually dressed up yesterday, Rich. That's the funny part. Like, I was all nice and showered, and my
I
hair
was
was
figuring I
done.
should put a hat on because I got a lot of glare coming off here. I mean, I might have to put a hat on.
Did you notice yesterday how shiny my face was? It was actually embarrassing. Then I found some cottage cheese in one of my teeth, so that was
You
that
did
was
not. Come
I
on.
did. I did in the first recording. Hold on, mate. Yeah, we're good today. Why don't we start off with introductions, Rich? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for folks that maybe don't know us? I realize this is our fifth or sixth time doing this, but let's do it anyway, and then I'll introduce myself, and then I'll randomly go through and we'll start picking through some of these questions and see
Awesome.
how well this goes.
Rich Lyons, for those of you that don't know me, I founded Lyons Consulting Group, Lyons CG, in 2003, I guess. Ran the agency for 14 years with Dave Barr and Norma Lisi. Sold in 2017 to Capgemini. Stayed there for 4 years. That's a separate story we'll talk about a different time, how enjoyable that was. And then the last 2.5 years, I've been doing advising and consulting. I'm married to my wife, Dr. Gertrude. She has made me a better man, no question. We'll talk about that maybe another time. But we've been married, we'll be 34 years this year. I have two, amazing daughters. Morgan's 27, Hannah's 25. And undergrad, I was an engineer, but I never coded, I never programmed. TJ was more technical than I was. And then I got my MBA and then switched to the dark side, marketing and sales. So became much more involved in business development.
Yeah, well, you were a savage on the sales side. So, my name's Thomas Obrey. Everyone calls me TJ. The longer you get to know me, you'll eventually just call me T, which is where we got Tea with Rich from. I started an agency with a buddy of mine, Eric Dodier, in 1994 as a full service digital agency, kind of doing a little bit of everything: demo diskettes, CDs, websites, mobile apps, content management. All these things that everyone considers standard, we were sort of inhaling them as they came up, and got introduced to the Demandware platform in '05 by Stefan and Wayne and Ulrika, and that's actually where I met Rich for the first time. And went all in on e-commerce and Demandware, now Salesforce, pretty much for the last 15 years or so. So had this agency up until about 18 months ago. We actually sold it to IPG, Interpublic Group, in October of 2022. And I did about 18 months there after the acquisition. And I'm currently on sabbatical and literally losing my fucking mind.
I'm pulling them out of sabbatical. I had to get permission from the Queen so that we could
Yes,
do the podcast.
yes, yes, you did. I measure my marriage now in days. I'm about 564 days into my new marriage to literally the greatest human I've ever had the pleasure of spending time with. And then I got three boys, teenagers. They're awesome. Mason, Dylan, and Jackson. I know a lot of people in our industry were surprised several years ago to hear I had kids, given what they knew about me after midnight. But and unlike Rich, I didn't go to college. Unfortunately, I didn't actually finish high school, but I found out I was going to be a sophomore for the third time. So I figured I'd go into the public markets and work in a warehouse for a little while. And lo and behold, I've proven that enough wrongs can make a right. So here we are today. So. It's funny, Rich. I didn't realize that you guys waited a while to have the girls, huh? Like
We did, yeah. We
7 years.
were married. I guess we waited 5 years. Yeah, We're married for like 5 years, six
That's
years,
a,
maybe 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
that's amazing. I was married once before in '07, no, '97, and then I had the boys in '04 and '05, so 14 months apart. So actually, I have Irish triplets, but I didn't realize that. That actually just kind of came up to me. So, uh, I love you. We're going to get into a lot of weird stuff here today and in future episodes as well. I think we're going to pick at a few questions here.
Sure.
Um, Rich, you want me to ask a question I asked in one of the failed recordings, or do you want me to continue to switch it up for you?
I mean, it's probably a good one, right? I mean, we could tell it's a good story because they're similar, but
The,
different, but pretty good.
the failure stories?
Yeah, yeah,
All right. So one of Rich's questions. So Rich and I basically wrote like 12 questions for each other and then put them together. And then, as I mentioned on LinkedIn, we got about a dozen questions from others. So one of the questions I picked this morning for Rich was threw him off, but that recording failed. So you guys get to see a smoother take on it now. Was, what do you consider to be your biggest failure? And I'll go first just because you made me go first
I
before.
did. I did.
Um, our biggest failure is, I'm going to start really early because we sort of waffled on professional or personal and all that type of stuff. I'm going the professional route in early days of Pixel. And our biggest failure was that our very first client in October, maybe early November of 1994, was Banyan Vines, and it was a demo diskette. If anyone remembers what a demo diskette was, I'll bring some artifacts out. I probably still have the diskette here. And it was to do basically a company demo on the Banyan Vine software on this thing. And we discovered rather quickly after some meetings and some sketches and prototypes. And you got to remember, I just left a networking company where this is all I did for 18 months, and I thought I was an expert at it. And Land of the Blind, the one-eyed man is king, is kind of reality back in the 90s. And I was definitely the one-eyed king. And we had a couple of meetings with them, and it was pretty clear that they thought they were paying like $6,500 for Jurassic Park, and we were trying to do a basic demo, and we had to give them their money back. Eric and I pained over it, and we were super worried. Like, there was no way we could do what they need. Their expectations are really out of whack. Now, you got to remember, I'm 24 years old. He's 24 years old. We're like literally weeks into starting this business together, working off of credit cards. And our very first alignment dialogue was, yeah, let's just give them their money back. So Eric had to call them and say, yeah, we're respectfully going to have to like not do the project for you. And they actually sent real checks back then. So we actually had to put the check back in an envelope and mail it back to them. And it was a good learning moment. It's setting expectations is something that you need to learn early and often, and that was a
Good.
setting expectations lesson masterclass. And in hindsight, it worked out really well because we actually got our first two paying clients in between Christmas and New Year's of 1994, and those brands ended up being clients of ours for years after that. Bus Tech and Ascom Timeplex. So it was amazing, but it was a horror story. Lost sleep. Probably threw up a couple times, had bad anxiety, all the things that go along with thinking you know what you're doing and realizing that you don't maybe, and having to actually give money back. And in 1994, $6,500 for our first business account was titanic. So it was pretty bad on us, and specifically me. I felt like I'd actually let Eric down, but I was like, dude, they want a TV show on a diskette. And so he got it, but then we crushed it for 29 and a half years after that. So
That's awesome.
Rich, why don't you give us your, so back to the question was, what do you consider to be your biggest failure? And just to gild the lily a little bit, I didn't realize that you guys had just gotten into Magento in '09 after the mortgage crisis. So
Yeah.
I always thought you guys were around a lot longer. You got real big and real famous real quick, but why don't you tell the story about kind of
we started in '03, right? But we were still doing, staff aug stuff. We were doing SAP. We were doing everything, networking stuff, whatever someone came to us with. We're like, sure, we can do that. Then we go find someone to do it, right? I told you the story, Dave and I, like we were just staff aug guys in the beginning until we then 2005, right? Hooked up with Demandware and started doing e-commerce. But then, if you remember, Demandware was going up market. So there was this kind of middle market that they were leaving behind. So we decided, okay, we'll start doing Magento. And like you said, we went through the crash, the bank crash. Or I mean, this is for another time, but our loan got called in. Our bank went under. I mean, there was some shit, right? So we'll talk about that. I had to borrow money from my mom. So some other stories that we can get into in terms of being an entrepreneur, right? Like about the last thing you want to do is borrow money from your mom, but it all worked out. But 2009, we just started. Magento Enterprise came out. We're like, okay, we need this, and we'll have Callahan on at some point, and he'll be really happy when he tells that story. When I called up him and said, hey, we're going to start doing Magento. We won't cross paths. Like you guys are going up market. We'll just keep it in the, SMB space, right? So first customer bowling shirt company. Literally, they make bowling shirts, button-up bowling shirts, right? Customize them. And so we're building this on the first version of Magento Enterprise, very first version, right? So there's some, it was buggy.
1.0.
Yeah, no, it was buggy, right? Because you had all the community stuff, but then they launched this Enterprise 2009. And so we're working through it. We have, we're working with their Magento team in the Ukraine, and we had some guys in the Ukraine through Sparrow Tech, and, we're trying to figure out, you got to separate the back end from the front end, because if you had people in the back end doing stuff, then the front end performance just went it was crazy, right? So I flew out to LA and met with Roy and, Bob Schwartz. And, in the early days, right, we had this money back guarantee. No questions asked. We're going to give you a money back guarantee. We thought this is a differentiator. We're standing behind our work, right? So money back guarantee. And this bowling shirt company, we're getting ready to launch, and the guy calls me, and literally the next week is IRCE in Chicago. We already have our bowling shirts with Lyons CG on them. We're going to do this big blowout, our first launch of a Magento site. We've got our booth, like it's going. Calls me and he says, my business isn't doing well. I don't think I'm going to launch the site. Can you send me back my money?
Was that the first call in for a refund ever?
First calling for refund ever.
Oh,
Ever.
and it was not a small.
And it was 60 grand. No, it was 60 grand. Like 60, and we're done though. The site's built. Like we're ready to launch this fucking site, and we're all set up for this next week in our booth. And I was beside myself. This was like a crisis, dark night of the soul. Like, what do I do? And of course I had to send the money back. Like there was no question. Like I knew I had to do it. It was a promise. I stick to my promises, right? That's my principle. Of course, I'm never going to not do what I say I would do. And I remember, calling my friend Scott, who and I was crying. I was like, dude, this could put us under. Like literally, we might go out of business. Like I'm sending this check. I can't afford to send back 60 grand. At that time, we just, come through the bank crisis. And I'm like, but I know I have to do it. And so literally write a check, like you said, paper check, put it in a FedEx, overnight it to him. And I was just, I was kind of beside myself. So we went to the show, and then when I was out with Roy and Bob, I told Bob Schwartz, I'm like, I sent back the check. He's like, what? Wait, what? Like, what? You sent them a check back? Like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, of course we did. He's like, no way. So the story started to grow, and I'm at the show, walking around, talking to people, tail between my legs, like, we didn't launch our first site. Like, that's a failure, right? That's a failure. I had to give back 60 grand.
Was that the project cost, 60K?
Yeah, we were done, dude. We were done. And so, but it became this thing, like you gave back $60,000. Like you guys really stuck to your word. Like you did, like you really did that. And it started growing and growing. And then all of a sudden was this failure that I was, like we're going to go out of business, became kind of the story that people are like, we kind of want to work with that company. Like that they'll like, that they lived to their word. They gave money back. Like that shows a lot of principle, right? Sticking to your word. So we and this is funny, we kind of changed that money back unconditional guarantee to kind of more of a satisfaction guarantee. Like if you're not happy with what we've done, we'll fix it for free, and if you're still not happy, we'll give you your money back for that piece of work, which was different than that unconditional, like even if you just decide you don't want it anymore, you can get your money back.
Well, especially with the size of projects now. I mean, I
Oh,
try and tell people like we used to do projects that were 40 or $50,000 back in the day that are now four, five, $600,000.
oh
You
yeah.
know, like that's a nightmare. I can't. I mean, I've been in there. The anxiety is brutal.
Oh,
Um,
like you said, like sleepless nights. Like I was just like, you felt like someone stabbed you in the heart.
Yeah, well, I think people don't understand. Like, they think owning a business and all of this entrepreneurial stuff is amazing and fun, but nobody knows about the sleepless nights. Nobody knows about the waking up at 2 a.m. in a full body sweat, wanting to throw up. No one
Well,
knows
writing
about.
checks to make payroll, like you and I were talking about that. Like I remember checking the mail, like opening up mail, like did the check come in? Because if not, I'm writing a personal check to make payroll tomorrow.
Yeah, those are and were scary days. But it's an interesting story on the Magento thing because I didn't realize that was like '09, and we'll come back to that dialogue at some point because your story about what the mortgage crisis did to you is we got pretty beat up on it too, but you definitely drew the short straw on all of that stuff. And
It was tough.
listen, I mean, it's so funny because I didn't really know you that well back then, but you know, you've always been like gold, and you've always been a mile marker and somebody that I can say honestly, I speak for our industry that we all love you and look up for you and consider you to be
Thank you.
really the grandfather of all these things that we're doing. And I don't think there's, and I don't mean, grandfather, relatively speaking, a young grandfather from maybe West Virginia. How's that?
I'll be 59 this year, so I'm getting up there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just turned 54 and had my second Prenuvo scan. Have you done the Prenuvo thing yet?
No.
Oh, dude, it's like a private health. It's basically a full body MRI. You do it
Oh,
by.
actually, I have done that. I have done that. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I did
So,
where they do. I did the MRIs, but then all the ultrasounds and like everything, right? Blood tests. Yeah, it's good to do.
well, Shannon. Well, so my wife's a nurse. For anyone that doesn't know, and one of the stats she was telling me a couple of years ago when she was in school was that most of the sicknesses that we get diagnosed with are 80 to 90% progressed before they're even noticed. And I'm like,
Before you find them, yeah.
yeah, I'm like, fuck that. Put me in the machine and scan me. I'm like, I'll put that shit on a credit card and take a year to pay it off, which I didn't do, but Um, but no, no, no. I'm in my mid 50s. Shit breaks quick, and snapping back is a lot slower than I remember it being too.
My recovery is a lot. I mean, I remember, you hurt yourself, the next day you're like, oh, I'm pretty good. Yeah, it takes a lot longer. I hate to say it.
Yeah, yeah. Too many trips up the stairs, and I got a bad day that morning.
You're
So.
gonna have to put an elevator in that house.
You know what? They framed it for an elevator, but God, they're so expensive and they're so loud, and I feel kind of shitty. I might just get one of those chair rails that I can just sit on and go down. They're all slow. You just like,
I
yeah.
like it.
I'll get one upstairs too for the second floor, dude. I've always lived on one floor home, so when we bought our first 2-floor house like 5 years ago, my ass hurt for weeks because I had to go up the stairs like 10 times a day. I'd never been upstairs
Dude,
before.
buns of steel, baby. Buns of
I was
steel.
telling Shannon, I'm like, hon, my bum is really sore. She's like, stop right now. Um, probably TMI. Um, why don't we dig into some of the questions from some of the LinkedIn guys? And I like this one from Frank DeMaria. And you worked with Frank at one point, wasn't he an LCG brand for you?
Yeah, he was at Jarden Consumer Solutions. Like we launched like 26 brands. He was great to work with.
Yeah, yeah. We tried to get in there and steal that from you, and I was personally involved in. I think moral of the story is it didn't work. So, but I got to know Frank, and like Frank is again on the brand side, kind of like Zengel was on the brand side. Like
He's
Frank's
a
a
geek.
legend, dude. He's so fucking smart. Like
We
him
have
and
to have him on because then he went to Newell and we worked with him a little bit there. But then he went to Design Within Reach and Herman Miller and I worked with him there. I mean, he's awesome.
yeah, he is. He reminds me of Dave. So him and like the other person I hold on a pedestal that high is actually Dave Finnegan of Orvis, and he used to previous to that he was with Build a Bear. Now he's with PE. But yeah, Frank's a smart dude. So Frank's question for us, Rich, was I'd love to hear the story about how you guys became close friends, especially when there was likely some competitive tension. So why don't I start with how I remember meeting you and how that blossomed, and then I'll let you kind of fill in the blanks on the other
All
side
right.
because I stayed on the business side, and then you went and exposed me as like a nice guy and everything, and kind of broke me down. Saw through the bullshit. You saw that on the other side of the shell was this soft boiled egg. So
100%.
I
100%.
appreciated that.
A
So
big-hearted father. How about that?
yeah, that's good. That's good. I just noticed your shirt. I like that actually.
That's the new sales brand. I'm gonna roll out Life is Sales, brother.
Yeah, this is a Gregory Sif. So I have a buddy that's an artist. You met Gregory. He was at the
Yeah.
wedding. But Gregory does all these icons and
Oh, that's
does some of
awesome.
my tattoos. So he does a line of apparel that
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
yeah. So that whole graying youth tattoo that I
Yeah.
have is actually drawn by him. It's actually a portrait of me. And then actually there's a funny story to that too. But let's get to Frank's question. So
Yeah,
how
the
did
tattoos will come. The tattoo stories will be later.
yeah. Actually, the tattoo stories are epic. So my first meaningful meeting of you, and I think we talked about it yesterday, that it was my very first pab at shop.org in Los Angeles. I think it was actually the last shop.org that there was.
Mm.
And I remember Brian DeMello got myself and Kevin from Blue Acorn at the time into the pab. And you guys had been in there for years, you and Adam and JB and I'm trying to think all the European dudes and Vince and that squad. And I remember going into the pab. I remember first of all being notified that I made it on the pab. And for those that don't know, it's the Commerce Cloud, formerly Demandware, B2C. I got to give all the acronyms. Partner Advisory Board.
Yeah, back then there wasn't. You didn't have those distinctions. It was just the Demandware Partner Advisory Board.
Well, now they just call it Commerce Cloud, which is a bigger clusterfuck than it's ever been. But we'll unwind that some other day too. That's another whole shit show to unwind. So I go into this room. So first of all, I get accepted to the pab. So I'm pretty excited because I had heard about a pab at Fontainebleau years earlier, because I heard Griff talking to Rich about it. He's like, yeah, well, we got the partner advisory board tomorrow and I'll see you there. And I was like, the fuck is the partner advisory board? And how come Rich is in there and I'm not? So I get invited to the pab and I go in, and it's the first time I actually had meaningful contact with you, right? Outside of just like casual, hey, how are yous? And you knew me and I knew you and competitors. And I was petrified in that room. I got in there, Adam grows. I hold on a very high pedestal. We'll have Adam on one day and I'll tell the story about Adam doesn't even know the story about how I met him and became friends with him. I forced myself on him. And then John Boo Anton and you, and I go in this room and you guys are like literally legends. You guys are talking like it's Gaelic to me on the product. And it's a product I'd been on for 10
Come
years.
on,
Swear to God.
you knew it.
And what I appreciated and what I liked about you, because I'd only known you as Rich, the Lyons consulting guy, that someday I wanted to be like, and we wanted to be like. Eric and I always watched what you were doing and what you did as a brand and how well you treated people and emulated that. Deacon was just mentioning that the other day on LinkedIn as well. But I sit in this pab with you guys and I'm like, petrified. And of course, you and Adam and John Bouanton are the chattiest of the entire group. And you guys are so passionate that like you give no quarter to the Commerce Cloud B2C product team, right? Like they would show you guys something and you would basically strip it naked and give them really constructive feedback. And, John and Adam are swearing and you're just all rich Midwest, right? You're like, well, guys, I don't know if really that's the right way. And it was the first time I get to watch you be purposeful and stealthy and like see you in a business context being a good dude. And what's interesting, what a lot of people don't know, is when you're on the pab, you actually spend 2 days together and you have to do a dinner together. So I would always make sure I sat near Rich or across from Rich because I wanted to get to know Rich. And there's parts of you that I admire so much that I actually think you've rubbed off on me over the last, I'm going to say it's been 8 or 9 years now. And then, we only saw each other at PAB and these industry shows, but the more
Like
we were at these shows,
4 times a year, probably, right? I mean,
it was 4 times a year, but they were intense. They were
NRF and Connections and Dreamforce, Shop.org.
exchange, yeah, and
Game,
and
yeah.
and
Back
then that
then,
occasional PAB meeting in Burlington or
yeah.
PKO or SKO or anything like that. And we just got really friendly. And then you grew a beard. I remember getting a picture with you the first time you showed up. You showed up to Dreamforce with a giant beard.
It was I mean, think about this. This isn't that long ago. It was 2017 because it was Movember. So
Correct.
November, right when I sold the company, I just said I'm going to do Movember. I'm going to raise money, for Men's Health, right?
Yeah.
So that was the first time I grew a beard.
Yeah, and
Not
I
that
think
long ago.
that was not too long after I was on the PAB, and we started hanging out a lot. And then we went to London, and I had tattoos, and we started talking about how you wanted tattoos. And long story short, I ended up designing Rich's tattoo, his entire back tattoo. And Rich came to Dover, New Hampshire, and had my guy Rut actually do it. Everyone thought Rut was me doing tattoos because we look alike. But we became friends because I think that if you took the business out of it, we were competitors who happened to be friendly. But then what happened was we became really good friends on the human side because Rich and I are a lot more alike than people would think. That just happen to be entrepreneurs, and we lean on each other a lot. I call you. We talk about some shit that people would be surprised we even talk about.
I
But
agree.
I don't know, dude. I just like you, and you're somebody that I've always wished I could be a little bit more like. I feel that way with Eric too, right? Like I talked about in the podcast that a lot of what I am today I garnered from watching Eric, and a lot of what I hope to be I garner from watching you. And I'm on sabbatical now, so I'm a couple of years behind you, but my goal would be to be on a similar track. We still got to get Legends and Lyons and the Wolf Agency off the blocks, but we'll do that. So, Rich, so that's my side of the story. Why don't you give
Yeah, I
your
think, I mean, and it's, I mean, we met early days, like '05, right? But I wouldn't say met, saw each other. We started coming across each other, right? Like those early first launches, literally first launches for both of us of Demandor, right? So we started getting into the ecosystem. And I mean, and I don't mean this, I mean, I always call it coopetition, right? Like you compete, but you cooperate. Like, and that's why the PABs I was so passionate about the PABs. Like there's enough business out there to go around for everyone, but for the ecosystem, for all of us, like we got to do good stuff together. The product's got to be great. We have to focus on the customer, and the most important thing is that customer being successful. And if we have people fucking things up and not launching, it was going to kill all of us, right? So I mean, that was kind of the PAB, like, hey, we need enablement. We can't let too many because remember there was that one time they added all these fucking partners, right? And then all I did was my whole business just grew tremendously from fixing fuck ups, right? Remember that? It was like you just could go around and fix things.
I do.
But then it came back down, right? Like kick some people out, that kind of thing. But I think I just was always, I'm shocked, right? That people thought like, how could you talk to TJ because you guys are competitors? Like, really? I mean, come on.
I think.
I mean, I'm not going to talk to you because we compete. I mean, come on. We have businesses, and you and Eric were great. Like, you guys would call me, and of course I would, talk with you guys. You guys had questions. I was like, I'll help anyone. Like, I'm kind of stupid that way, I guess, right? But
No. I don't. I think that's what a lot of people get wrong. I think what I appreciated about seeing you and Adam and JB and the PAB and Fjord and those guys was that, and then eventually Penella came in, was that all of our energy and passion, well, yours, which is how because I held the line for all you guys when you weren't on PAB. Like I was a pain in the ass, but like it was all passion towards like, we got to do better. We got to deliver better. We need a better product. We can't allow customers to be disappointed.
We can't. The customer has to be successful, or we don't have businesses.
Well, they used to get mad when I got all passionate in the PABs, and I'm like, this is all I do. Like, I don't have a Magento practice. I don't have a Shopify practice. I don't have a Hybris practice. I got a this practice. So if you guys fuck this thing up, then that's a lot of families that we have.
We had a lot of fights, right? We had fights about customer success. Remember that? We had with Troy, we had all these big fights, like whose customer is it? And we got to work better together. I mean, there was all of that.
It's
But
gone
yeah,
downhill quite a bit since you left the pab. I just came off it at the end of last year. I actually got a chain letter telling me I wasn't chosen, which is pretty funny after 8.5.
did you get like a little plaque or anything?
No,
Come on.
I didn't even get a thank you call or
I
email.
was. I think it's probably up there. I think it is actually. I think I left early enough where I,
Fucking
I just wanted to leave early enough because I wanted my fuck. Because remember, all these other guys got kicked off the pab, and they
correct.
got a plaque, and they got
Yeah,
kicked
Kevin,
off.
Kevin got kicked off and got a fucking plaque. Meanwhile, I'm 8 years. But hey, listen, it is what it is. I wouldn't change the experience ever. You know,
I gotta say one other thing about how we became close friends because I gotta call you out a little bit too. I know you were wanting me to skip this part, but to finish the question for Frank, I mean, I think your persona, like we had opposite personas, and that's why people, I think, public personas, let's say, and I think that's why people thought, how can you guys be friends? Like TJ's East Coast, a little aggressive, uh,
spicy.
spicy. I like spicy better. And but a partier, like he's the guy who's out, and that's all he does. He's just a super partier. And Rich, you don't drink, and you're Midwest, and you're this family guy. And so that's how people thought we were, right? I was more contained for sure. Midwest, everyone's a friend. You're more spicy, but the truth is, like you said, we're more alike. So as I got to know you, like people never knew that you're a father. People don't
Correct.
know how big your heart was, right? Like you're so caring, and that's what I love about you. I get a little choked up here, but you know, you're a real person,
I appreciate that.
right? With a big heart, right? And you love your kids. You do anything for your kids, right? And
Yeah.
now also for Shannon. And I don't think, the people that know that, but I don't think everyone just saw this. TJ's at the clubs and he's got table service and he's there till 4, right? But they don't see what I always saw. Like here's a guy that cares for everyone around him, including his employees, including his customers. So I think to sum up, that's how we became close friends because TJ's good people.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you say that because how many text messages and videos have I sent you at 3 in the morning saying, get the fuck over here. I got a cranberry for you. But,
Yeah,
it's
it was like TJ and Nava sending me videos like, Rich, it's in Vegas. I'm in bed. I'm sleeping. Come on over. We have a cranberry for you and all these pictures and stuff.
we always did. And what's funny is I remember one time several years ago, I started talking about my kids and the squad that knows me on the shows. They're like, wait, you have children? I'm like, yeah, I have children. They're like, but you're this like animal. I was like, you see me 4 times a year for 3 days. Okay. Like that's not my life. That's my job. That's my work. That's what I do. I got to go out. I got to entertain. I have to work during the day and I have to entertain at night. And it just happens to be that my entertainment gear is a little more intense than most people are
So
accustomed.
now everyone will know, TJ. I mean, the secret's out, man.
Yeah, well, secrets out. I'll cry at a puppy commercial on a
No, that's it.
Sunday morning.
I'm the biggest baby. We'll talk about it at some other time about, how being a parent has changed us, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'm the biggest baby ever. I mean, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and Frank, if you ever get to this point, 33 minutes in, we certainly appreciate the question that you put up there because it is something that people kind of lose their mind over. Let's go into this kind of next set of questions here. Let's go with Marco. We talked a little bit about Marco Bond yesterday. So Marco Bond was one of the founding partners with Joe and I forget the other young lady's name of Tomorrow Agency, so Shopify agency. Yes, I said Shopify. Believe it or not, I've designed and developed and stood up and managed Shopify sites. I just didn't do it for a job. But Marco's got some awesome questions here. And I thought maybe we would end today with these questions and then maybe one outgoing statement because it's really around Marco recently took in private equity and there's all these misconceptions of how to run an agency and the truths and lies about mergers and what habits do you need to be successful and how do you balance work life? So we're going to go through all of these questions for Marco. There's actually 5 of them here. So, and I'll start with you, Rich. So Rich, name a common misconception about running an agency and why.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go all the way back in the early days, and it wasn't even running an agency; it was just running a business. Like my biggest misconception was about cash and cash flow. Like I had got my MBA at Kellogg, whatever. I thought I was a very smart person, but when I had that piece of paper that showed, money, right? Like you're making money. Like here's this number, and then I look in the bank account and I have no money. Right. So I didn't quite understand this cash flow concept. Like that was something that came that I had to learn quickly, right? Because I'm hiring people, I'm paying people before I'm getting paid. Like I didn't understand this concept. Like my customers are paying me way out there and I'm paying my employees right now. So this thing like I needed a bank relationship, I needed a line of credit, I'm writing money, I had my own line of credit off my house and I'm leveraging everything. But that was my biggest business misconception. Like I just didn't understand. I'm starting my own business. Like you need some working capital, right? That
Yeah.
was a tough one.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's the opposite that we ran into. We it was just him and I don't think we hired our first employee for a few months, and we got our first loan. We got a business loan in December of '94. It was $50,000, right? And honestly, it was the smartest thing we ever did because I wanted to throw up. But
Right.
I have the paperwork. I have the original loan paperwork here in the office. I have a lot of stuff from over the years, but. So a common misconception about running an agency and why for me is that if you have the knowledge to do it, that you can do it for others, and that being super talented and super knowledgeable about how to do the work is all you need to actually start an agency, and that's definitely a misconception. Anytime you're going to start an agency, you really need a good partner and partnership, right? Now, Rich, you had Gertrude behind the scenes, which is stunning, right? I have Eric right in front of the scenes. So what a lot of people don't know is that Eric and I we were 50-50 partners for 27 and a half years, literally right until we took PE in. And even when we took PE in, we were still exactly the same. And he was the promise, so he was the sales guy and I was the process. And I don't think either of us could have survived without that partnership. So I think doing it alone and thinking that knowledge and ambition enough is going to do it is a recipe for a disaster. I think that he's really the business guy, and I'm the get it done guy. I'm the plow horse, and he's the guy in the back office. I never had any idea how much money we had. I remember asking him. I was like, "Hey, like, do we have any money?" He's like, "Yeah, we got so and so." I'm like, "Can Oh, that's a lot. Like, can I have some?" He's like, "What are you gonna do with it?" I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "No." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So like for literally for 25 years, Eric metered how much money I was given so that I didn't go out and buy a Porsche or something.
He had to
But
keep you out of trouble. That's great.
yeah, I think a common misconception is just that you can go it alone, and that hard work and knowledge solves everything, and it doesn't. There's so many nuances to running an agency and so many dynamics, and if you don't have a good partnership and a good partner that you trust, that is a complete counterbalance to you. You can't have two designers or two business people. It's got to be very, very yin and yangy.
Yeah.
That's kind of what was successful for us. So and that it's easy. I can promise you that it's the exact opposite of easy. So, and for all the fun that you see on Instagram and all the neat things that you see me post over the years, what you don't see is the 100-hour weeks and the waking up at 3 a.m. and the cold sweats because I'm not sure if I'm going to deliver a project on time, and I have to make that phone call in the morning, and that's a pretty scary thing to deal with. So another question from Marco Rich. Two truths and a lie about working through a merger.
Oh, well, the lie for sure is that it's going to be easy because it's not. And, part of that lie is, I thought that I was going to change the culture of a 350,000 person organization, right? And that was a lie. I mean, I tried, but that was a huge lie. Truths, I think there's more resources that, came our way. I think for the people that stayed, there were some good jobs, so that was a truth. I mean, there was this potential, like we were looking at, and you did it differently, but think about from us, we were still only commerce. So we started sneaking into marketing cloud, but we weren't doing service. We weren't doing sales. We weren't doing other clouds, right? And it became clear you needed to, and you got that and you did it with Rafter One. But I think the truth was that it gave us the capability to do more for a customer, to do, customer experience like sales, service, marketing, and commerce. So
Hmm.
we could offer our clients more. So I do think that's a truth. And there were more resources, more training resources, more things that we didn't have, more opportunities for people to take on different jobs, work in different things where we were very focused as a smaller agency. So I think there are some truths in that. But the lie was, I mean, it was hard. Like, I think people don't understand how much protecting Dave and I did of our culture, protecting, of not getting people distracted, like just warding off this beast of a company for, a couple years. So
Yeah. So my two truths and a lie about working through a merger. I would say one of the truths is that it's a chance for kind of a rebirth and a recasting of your mission and your vision and kind of what you want to be when you grow up with expanded services and expanded resources and expanded reach. It's kind of a catch 22. Some people like the boutique and some people get really scared of the merger and the larger organization. Um, it's a weird thing to deal with, but it does create an opportunity, but it also creates a lot of risk. That's probably the other truth, is that
yeah,
it's a tremendous amount of work and there's a lot of risk involved there in shooting the gap between who you were and who they were, right? Because when you talk about a merger, there's another piece there, and then who you actually want to be. So those are the truths, that there's a lot of opportunity, but there's a lot of expectations and kind of vibe and ethics and service management that go in there. The lie, I think, is that it is going to be what it is, and you just got to kind of roll with the punches. I think that's actually bullshit. I think that if you're going to get involved in a merger, the lie that it's not going to be what you want or what you think or what it was is wrong. I think that you have to be the custodian of your teams and your team members and the vibe, and more important, your customers. And you
right,
have to fight tooth and nail every day, every week, to make sure the message is what it should be, not good enough, right? That the branding is where it needs to be, that the promise, that the delivery, that you're not softening on the edges because, oh, this is what happens when you get bigger. Like, shit slides. You
right.
make more money, you eat shitty food. You make more money, you got more cars, right? You can't let that stuff happen. You've got to be tight, and the lie is that you have to compromise your values for the greater good. And the reality is that it's your values that people found interesting when you went into the merger. So don't lay back and be soft on putting your voice forward and making sure that what made you who you are is a big part of what makes the combined you who you're going to be. And that's a thankless job, and you can never give up on it. I remember coming up with the name. I remember the taglines. I remember writing the taglines. I remember the precision with which the wording had to be used. Not a, like very weird, nuanced things that nobody thinks about 3 or 4 months from now, or nobody in a committee cares about. They're like, it kind of means the same. It doesn't mean the same. I can
Yeah,
tell you that right now. Looking at your decks, making sure they're tight. So that's those are my truths and my lies. So.
yeah. That the last part was the part I found to be really tiring.
Yeah, it's exhausting because you got to put a brave face on, but then you got to go home and basically fucking cry in silence, right? Because you're so stressed out, because you can't really show that to, you got to remember, we got, when I was running just the B2C side, it was 150 people, right? That's 150 families, right? That's communities, like it's thousands of people that we're impacting with all of these
Right.
decisions. And a lot of people don't think like that, but unfortunately that's how I think. So let's go to Marco's third question. What skill did you think was the most important for leading a team, yet what skill did it actually end up being?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny in the beginning, and I guess we keep going early, which I think is helpful for early stage entrepreneurs, right? People starting out. I thought in the beginning I had to know everything. I had to have all the answers. Like I thought I had to have the skill of, being omniscient, like knowing what was going to happen. And, someone asks you something and you're like, I have to have an answer. I have to know everything. Like there's no question. And I think what you said was super important. You have to have good people around you. You can't do it yourself. So I did think in the beginning, like it was just, I had to do everything. I had to have all the answers. I had to carry all the stress. And I think what skill over time, did I think was the most important? I think was, and maybe this isn't a skill, but I do think you were even mentioning it, the culture piece, right? Like what, as a leader, where was I leading towards? Because I'm leading all the time. So everything I said, every action, every reaction, to me, that was way more important. So sometimes I would say maybe that biggest skill for me was awareness, right? I had to be aware of what was going on with me, and I had to be aware of what I was communicating because I was creating a culture and I was creating belief in people, right? I believed in them. I believed in what we could do. Even though I had this, let's call it a tornado going on inside of me because, like you said, I'm fucking terrified and I would go home and cry. But I had to be, you know, unconsciously competent and just like telling them like we're doing the right thing, we're going to be successful, we're going to be the best, and we're going to do the best for our customers, and everything's going to work out.
It's funny you say that. People always said, I'm very guarded with what I say to staff and how I say it. Like that's something I learned in the last 10 years or so. And somebody asked me like, why don't you just like tell them the truth or tell them this? I'm like, well, I always metaphor with my kids. Like there comes a time when, the kids don't need to know there's no Easter bunny. And there's a time when they need to know that there's no Easter bunny. And the timing of that is very different for every adult in history.
I
Right.
love that. Yeah.
And, we kept Santa, right? Because Santa's on a sleigh and he moves quick. So Santa can go to multiple houses. I was divorced, so we had 2 homes. But my story with my kids was, well, this baby's being born all the time. And the Easter Bunny, he doesn't have a whip. He just has to basically strut. So he can't strut to all these houses with babies coming. You got a baby around the corner. So they're going to take him. We're going to give it up. He's still going to go to your mom's, right?
I
So
love that.
the thing that I thought was most important um, in the beginning was being the best at everything and being an expert. Now, remember, I'm a practitioner, so I'm a designer, I'm a developer, I'm a strategist, I'm a sales guy. I could do it all. Like literally, I could do it all back in the day. But what happened was people started coming in that were way better than me and way smarter than me. And what I actually learned that most people don't have was how to be a little bit more of a empathetic mentor and how to be conversationally competent without necessarily being skill competent. And what I mean by conversationally competent is that I had to learn how to be comfortable in any conversation at any altitude that it went to, up or down, in the boardroom or in the IT closet with the guys, which I literally would have to do because our shit ran on servers. But, the thing that actually ended up being the skill that I needed was just conversational comfort, right? Not being afraid to talk to people, not being afraid to be honest, not being afraid to show emotion and empathy, and not being afraid to coax more out of people than I think that they thought that they could do themselves. I think so many people out there have shitty leadership and shitty management. And I think that the thing that I found most satisfying was when I could sit down with somebody and they were really having a hard time or a bad day personally or professionally and just give them an hour of my time and just turn the day around or turn the week around and then give them an opportunity and give them an offer of my time and my influence and my support to help them. Like, I'm not just saying, hey, go grab an oar. I'm like, go grab 2 oars. I'll be right behind you. Right. So, in the beginning, it was about being the best at everything. In the end, it was about like knowing when to be quiet, knowing what really needed to happen. Because a lot of the issues with work are outside of work. Has been my experience. So
No, that's great. Yeah, I didn't have to deal with that because I was just the sales guy. I never delivered ever. Never billed an hour.
yeah, but you must have like got pulled into rooms where you had a
Sure.
super spicy client and a project manager that literally was white as a ghost and petrified and
Oh,
hives on their chest, and like you're trying to like diffuse the situation, right?
oh, for sure. We'll have to tell some of those stories.
Yeah,
That's
I
really
mean,
good.
I've only been in, I mean, not a lot. I mean, definitely 1,000, but it's not that many. Um, so we're gonna go through Marco's next 2 questions. So where do you stand on work-life balance and why we find that question so fucking infuriating?
It's a it's a super cool question because in the beginning when we were talking about culture and talking about values and principles, like we had this concept of balance, right? And it was really really funny. Like we even had it on our website, and we would list balance. And I had a marketing woman back then, and she like took it off the site and didn't even tell me, and didn't even bring it up with me. And I remember looking on the site, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how did you, like, that was one of our values. Like, how did you change that? She's like, well, it's not true. I'm like, what the fuck do you mean it's not true? Like, I was super pissed. Like, you can imagine, I don't get that mad, but I'm like, what do you mean it's not true? And you can't fucking take something off the website without telling me, right? Earlier days. And she's like, it's not true. We don't have balance. And it was so funny. I remember like noodling on that and then getting to the fact like she was actually right. And we changed things. So we changed, so this work-life balance. I think if you're going to choose to be a consultant, it's not going to be balanced sometimes, especially in our industry. So we changed to work hard, play hard, right? And then our hiring changed. The people we hired changed because we would say, listen, it's not going to be balanced. It's not going to be. If a website is down, someone's staying up 24 hours, 48 hours, right? And that's what we're choosing. We're in consulting. Like, our customer comes first. If their site's down, that's their livelihood. Someone's going to lose their job. So we're going to stay up and we're going to do everything we can, even if it's not our fault. Correct. We're still going to do it. So, I mean, I think it's kind of a fallacy, and it doesn't mean you can't be balanced over the long term. And that's why I'm saying work hard, play hard, right? We had a lot of fun, right? And we would do a lot of fun things. But if you had to grind in that, you have to launch a site, right? And you're behind schedule, or their site's down and you're maintaining it and it's up to you, you got to do what you got to do. And that was kind of me. And if you don't want that, then don't come work with me, because that's our promise.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? I have served, I will be of service, right? I remember before the Demandware days, like, holidays and nights and major campaigns, like, we were in the data center watching a router and watching bandwidth reports on a router. Like, you had to do it. So for me,
like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, like being on a call at midnight.
No, I remember. We never even, the concept of load balancing and load testing didn't even occur to me till Demandware days. Like, in the early, no one gave a shit about that stuff. That was early Akamai days. But for me, work-life balance, like, there's a young me and an old me version. The young me is that, sleep when you're dead. And, we're here to do a job, and people are relying on us. And if we didn't want to be relied on, then, go dig ditches somewhere, right? That was young me, right? But I also created balance. I think balance is what you make of it, right? Yeah. I think that everyone's looking. I think an interesting issue is that everyone's looking for work-life balance at the expense of working, not work-life balance, which is be productive and a good citizen in your career, right? Put work in that deserves to be put in. But the life balance means be a good citizen as a life partner, whatever your method of doing that is, and put the work in there, right? Like, so many people complain they don't have balance. I think time is what you make of it. I think that if you want more time, you have to create more time. People are like, oh my God, you get up at 5. What do you do? I'm like, I don't know. The house is quiet for an hour and a half. I do whatever I want. I read, I do dishes. I don't clean at night. I clean in the morning. I'll go work out. I'll go train. I do martial arts. But I think work-life balance, I think everyone's trying to figure out everyone thinks we're taking from their life to get work out of them. And the real issue that I see is everyone's trying to take from the expectations of career and work to get more life out of it. I think they need to be in parity, and I think each individual needs to decide what parity is. I've learned to create time. And for my staff that reported into me, my leadership team when I left, Rafter One is probably the best leadership team I've had in a decade, 15 years or so. But I don't sweat the small stuff. Like, you got an issue with your cat, go. You got to bring your dad to cataract reviews, go. Like, you got a dentist appointment, your kid is sick, I don't care. Like, but when I need you, I need you.
As long as you're getting your job done, right? I mean.
But that's a relative term, right? Getting your job done is relative, right? Because there's with the COVID instance, where's the mile marker for getting your job done now, right? Like, nobody knows where it is. Like, we don't know how high the decibel meter goes on productivity, right? That's why we saw so much hiring and so much, unfortunately coming out of COVID. But I'm going to call on you and I'm going to need you And just like you need me, I expect you to be there for me. And that's the social contract we should have with the people that we report into. But we have to be skeptical and learn to listen, right? That's the fifth agreement,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I mean, it's great what you're saying, and I totally agree. And I think, maybe there were some times, especially early days, right? You're working all the time, no question. Where maybe I wasn't around for my kids and things, and felt bad and stuff. But I took an approach that it was more quality of time,
Correct. I
not
agree.
quantity. And I think people miss that. You want more
That's
time off,
why
you can go
that's why I get
binge.
table service at midnight. I
Right.
get, I get quality time with 10 or 15
Exactly.
of my very closest friends. And, hey,
You got to
listen,
make the best of it.
you got to make time. Like, go to bed at 10. That's fine. However, me and 12 of the most amazing savages in our industry, we're going to be up till 5 a.m. We're going to look like shit and be walking around like zombies the next day, but we're also going to be down at 7 a.m. for breakfast. So, and we're
Right.
going to do that for 3 days, and then we're going to go home and we're going to sleep for a week. So, but no, we'll come. On the being a better dad thing, like getting divorced made me a better dad. We'll come back to that topic some
Yeah.
other day. But
No, for sure.
I was not a great dad. Early on, I had no balance. I worked. I left at 5 in the morning. I came home at 9 o'clock at night. I didn't see him wake up. I didn't see him go to bed. I barely read to him, and then I got divorced and reality kicked in. But I think balance is what you make of it. But
I
you got to remember that balancing work means focusing on work and being balanced in your work. And balancing life means focusing on your life and being balanced in your life. It doesn't mean sucking the energy out of either for the other. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that people forget about.
And someone always said to me, like, the busiest people always find time, right?
I do. You'd be shocked how many people in the last month have wanted to talk to me. So what I do is I literally say, you pick the day, you pick the time, and if you want to meet up, you pick the location. I do. Because I don't want any excuses.
Right.
I bet, I shit you not, in the last 6 weeks, 3/4 of those appointments have been canceled at the last minute on me. Their time, their day, their location, whether it's phone or Zoom, have canceled. And by the way, if you're one of those people, yes, I'm talking about you, because failure to execute in your business or your life, you'll never get balance if you don't know how to execute and
No,
prioritize.
I agree.
So,
Right on, brother.
one more question, and then we'll close this out. Again, Marco, I hope I did you well with my Northeast and whatever you want to call it, drawl. What's a regular habit, Rich, that you picked up later in your career that you wish you started doing sooner?
Oh, a habit, huh? That's a tough one. There's a couple things just that, come to mind. I think, and this one might seem weird as we just talked about balance, but sleep. I mean, early in my career, I just I thought, well, you don't need to sleep. I mean, you're a wuss if you need to sleep. I mean, I would use different words, but trying to be PC. But
Yeah.
but I literally, you get 3 or 4 hours a night. That was fine, and I just grind. I mean, there was no excuses, right? I didn't need sleep, and I do think. There's so many studies out now about the importance of sleep and everything, and I do think that you know I rode the horse hard, and I chose to do that, right? And it was fun. And I do think now later in my career, I mean, I do value sleep a lot more. It helps me to be sharper. I mean, there's a way that I can come in, being sharper. And like you said, I don't recover as easily. So maybe that's an age related thing. So I do think I valued, sleep a lot more. But that also changed my perception of other people too, that they need sleep, similarly. So I couldn't just be like, hey, well, I don't need sleep. You don't need sleep. Like, what's the problem, right? So I do think that was something that was a little different. And I would say one other thing. Um, Early in my career, like I think I made excuses for people. I think I took care of people. I think I didn't hold people accountable, and I took all that responsibility on me. Like my job is to make you successful, and I would give them everything I could, and I would take that responsibility, and I would feel that anxiety. And even in the early days, I would pay people too much, things like that. But I was the one feeling all the stress. And I think over time, I learned to drive some of that responsibility down. I don't know if that's a habit, but it kind of is. Like, to give people accountability, give people responsibility. I'm not carrying all the anxiety for everyone. So I'm going to drive some of that tension and anxiety down into the organization. Some of that can be done through comp plans. I'm happy to pay people a lot of money, to pay them more than me, but you got to do your job, right? So I want you to be at risk a little bit too. And I think that was something that kind of changed the game for me.
That's interesting. Actually, it's funny you say that. I have a habit of giving people a lot of rope and then snapping the door pretty fast in my early years. But I would say, so the question back to that was, what's a regular habit you picked up later in your career that you wish you started sooner? I have a few of them. Diet and exercise, or nutrition and exercise. I wish I'd started it earlier and I was more judicious about it. What I ate and how I treated my body, and underestimating what exercise means, right? I mean, muscle is your metabolic currency, and I could talk for days on that stuff as well. So that's one thing. Another thing that was, a late career thing was teaching versus telling. I used to tell people what to do, and I used to tell people how to do things, and I used to be able to do a lot of it, so it was easy for me to like point everything out. And moving from telling to teaching was something I wish I'd actually done earlier. I think I could have built better people and had a better rapport, and probably had a better business, quite frankly. The other thing was, the third thing for me was patience. I developed a level of patience in the last several years that I never had, and a level of empathy and like true caring for my staff and, quite frankly, my friends. Like, Rich and I get into some pretty deep dialogues that I never really had. And I think the unlock for me was that most of the problems that you'll find with your staff members are deeply rooted in something that has nothing to do with their job. And I know this goes against modern thinking, but if you don't have empathy and you're not willing to listen to these people, then they're not really going to be with you for the long term. And when we hire people, I tell them, I'm expecting 5 or 10 years out of you, not this new 6 to 18 month thing that people like to do.
Right.
And that kind of blows people's minds. And they're like, well, why? And I'm like, well, I have a lot of things to share with you and a lot of things to teach you. And I think you're a better this, that, or the other thing than even during the interview. I said, I think you have a ton of potential. Like, we need to work on that. But part of working on that is having empathy and getting dug in on the human side of it. I'm not saying we're going to go, fix your credit card debt and all of that bullshit, although I've offered to do that in the past. But, those are some things that I just, I wish I knew earlier on. And by the way, I know younger leaders that actually have that, right? So, we know Dylan just turned 29. Like that, I wasn't that smart at 29. No, when I was 29, it was only 1999 and it was a different era, but it was different. So
No, I love what you're saying about holding a vision for people beyond what they think they can do.
Yeah,
I think hugely important just to,
it's especially in this era of social and Instagram and all these false things that people put out there and all this wishing and wanting to be like other people. You know what I want to be when I grow up? People ask me all the time, because they used to ask when I interview, who do you guys want to be? I want to be a bigger, better, more well-refined, well-liked version of who I am now. I don't want to be different. I just want to be better. I just want to be more mature. That's it. That's all I ever wanted for our business. That's all I ever wanted for me. It's all I ever want for my kids, my wife, my friends, just to be a better version of who they are. And, it's not about changing people. It's about having a little faith in them and letting them know that, this little crevasse you got to jump over, it's not as wide as you think, and you're not going to die if you fall in it. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to learn more tripping and smacking your head off the side of it than you will by clean jumping it. So, and I don't think people take that as serious as I do. But again, could just be me. All right, Rich, we're at the end of our time here. We've successfully got through an hour.
We recorded.
We did. I appreciate your time. I appreciate these questions. We, in the next gathering, will get to questions from some of the other folks like Lassard and Oxley and Matt Hart and Rick Kenny and those. But, again, we're just getting this thing started. Rich, thank you. I appreciate it. Any parting words before I let you get back to your morning in Chicago?
It's always good to be with you and chat, my friend. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
All right. Tea with Rich, getting real. I'll talk to you later, buddy.
Thanks, brother.
Bye.